actually, after learning about Airbnb, after learning about house hacking, my next learning journey was actually about multifamily and syndication. I
Mm.
joined a mentorship program in Dallas. And that's where most of my knowledge lies right now, is in multifamily and in syndications. And so I knew that I wanted to leverage that property to get into that strategy. So I know I definitely could have went a different route, right? I could have refinanced it. I could have, got a loan on the property, but I kind of wanted to just, all right, let's move on from this. Let's take out what I can take out from this and move on and have the multifamily be my primary focus.
Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all. Real estate experiment. What is happening, y'all? Today, I have the pleasure of having Tonya Weathers here in the lab with us. And like a true practitioner, she brought her white coat on in the lab. She's ready to go, roll up her sleeves. And I'm super excited because Tanya's mission, she has a mission that speaks dear to my heart. I was talking about this right before we got online that, just looking at the bio, because the team does such a good job of finding true practitioners in this space who are actively not only applying what they've learned in their respective niches, but once they've identified what the blueprint is, like Tonya has, you're able to give back to the community. And you specifically have a niche in helping the minority women in the community, Black women, I would assume as well, which speaks a lot dear to my heart because that's in our community. We do need that as well. So I'm super stoked to have you here in the lab, Tonya. We are overdue. We talked about it, but here, Q1 2022, you're here in the lab. Welcome. How's it going today, Tonya?
I'm doing fantastic. Just happy to be here. Glad that we were able to finally connect. So thank you, thank you, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I always like to ask, I start this off a little bit differently here and there because everyone's story is very unique. But when I look at yours, I see you have a lot of experience. I mean, you're right now. We talked about you're in Tampa, but you've also planted some seeds in the Dallas area, and you've done a lot of different things from buy and hold, short-term rentals, to again house hacking, which we love so much for our beginners. But I gotta ask you, and I always like to ask this because the reason why we have this show is for this reason, Tonya, so that we can have someone that can plant the seed and at least be the catalyst to a lot more of the experiments that you might be doing. And when I say experiments, it's you taking action. What was that seed that was planted for you? Like, did you grow up around real estate? You talk about breaking the curse, and that's I love that because it's talking about changing almost like the grassroots and kind of the blueprint. So for you, what was that aha moment, or where was that, I need to operate, I need to go in this direction? I'm just very curious as to how and where that happened in your life, Tonya.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been somebody who really was into education, right? That just was instilled in me from the get-go. My grandmother was an English teacher, and it was just always there within me. My parents as well always instilled teaching and education. And I think part of it did start there because I was able to teach myself things that a small town girl really doesn't learn about. We don't learn about financial literacy and retirement and how you can start young and things like that. So I think I just always had a curiosity about that. But I think what really was the turning point for me. So I was really stuck in this mode of I want to be a mother and I want to be a wife. I was in that mode for a long time. I was bred to think that was the only reason that I was meant to be here, really. And I went the route, right? I got into a wonderful relationship, wanted to have children, get the picket fence with the house, right? All the things, the dog, the everything. But unfortunately, one day, you know, after trying for a very long time, my relationship went sour. And at the same time, I lost my pregnancy. I was 7 months pregnant with twins, a boy and a girl, and it just went sour. And I went through this state of depression and not really understanding why this was happening to me. But I'm the type of person that always takes tragedy and trauma and try and dig deep into it and flip it around. So I took that trauma and I went back and I said, well, who are you besides a wife and a mother? And I was like, oh, well, I'm someone who loves to teach. I'm someone who loves financial literacy. I'm somebody who is really interested in breaking those generational curses that a lot of women in the minority community has. And so that was my aha moment. That's when I said, I'm going to take this trauma and this tragedy and turn it around and make it work for me. And that's exactly what I did. I said, I'm going to learn everything that I can about building financial freedom and breaking generational curses. And the thing that kept coming up time and time again, over and over again, was real estate, real estate, real
Mm.
estate. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to dive in it. I love education. I love learning. I'm going to learn everything that there is to possibly learn about real estate. So that was like my aha moment, and how my story kind of began with real estate.
Tanya, the reason I love that is because, anytime I've had such a luxury to be surrounded by great practitioners like yourself, who take action, and it seems to always start with the mindset. And I just want to highlight that for a little bit, because I think it might give people help, and I feel like it's even myself right now. I'm kind of reflecting on it. So let's talk about the tragedy into kind of an opportunity. And it sounds like I want to also take a step back and talk about the almost like the identity with the opportunity. So you identify yourself as, this is who I am, I want to be a mother, etc., which is wonderful. But then you had to almost create a new identity for yourself. And how, I know that sounds like sometimes we kind of see it and it's like, wow, well, that's Tanya, like look at her now. But just like taking a step back, like what do you think one needs to do when they're looking to transition? Is it, do they need to remove themselves from I heard, I think someone, in my mastermind or something, talk about, removing yourself. You don't identify yourself with the result, identify yourself with the process, right? Like what kind of a person would be doing XYZ, and then identify with that. Like, what are your thoughts? Because I'm this is like totally open. I'm just thinking, like, what goes through your mind when we
Yeah.
talk about that identity?
Yeah. Well, I really had to ask myself, like, just the blank question of who am I?
Mm,
Um, who do I want to be? Who do I see myself as? Um, and that was the first step for me. But I think you're absolutely right. Whomever said it, that it was about the process of me figuring that out. It was, once I realized, okay, this Tanya that I thought that I was gonna be and wanted to be has now been challenged. And so let me step back and let me look inward. I'm definitely somebody who loves to reflect, and I
right.
love being self aware. And so I had to identify, um, why did I think that that old Tanya was me? Where did that come from? Did it come from it being planted in me from family and friends and the
Mm.
media? And where did it come from? Did it truly belong to me? Was that my true identity, or was it something that somebody put on me?
Ooh, I like that.
So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
and
is
it's
that, I
like
mean, is
just
that it though,
diving.
Tanya? Is that it? Is you think, because I'm a big believer of your environment. I was just having this thought process with my fiance. I was like, okay, like, I mean, we was talking about this in our company, like, show me who your friends are and I'll show you who you are. Right.
Yeah,
So for someone who's, maybe it's family, maybe it's friends, is it that? Is it like, I'm curious, when you made that shift, did you change the environment as well? How much time you spend, or maybe not? Because again, people, we hear different things, and I don't want to
yeah.
kind of echo these things that sound like, they're tacky, or people say them often, but it's not really true. I want to hear from you. Like, did you find that that was the case for you, or could you stay in the same environment and just start plugging in to different resources where you were at?
See, I think that's more of me, right? First
Mm,
of all, my circle is very small in the first place. And
Yeah.
so I didn't really have to get rid of or adjust
Mm.
too much. But I started plugging myself into different places. I'm like, okay, well, I want to start thinking this way. Let me plug myself into people. Let me get into these circles where those type of people are. And so for me, it really wasn't getting rid of, the bad apples, if you will, or those that weren't um, motivating me or influencing me. I've always had a very tight knit circle that is near and dear to my heart. So my journey was a little bit different.
Yeah.
But I really do think that your family and friends play a huge part on how you identify as. So does your traumas. Your traumas
Mm.
play a lot into who you are. I was actually just having a conversation with someone just this past weekend on, are you truly who you say you are? Are you a strong Black woman because you're a strong Black woman? Or are you a strong Black woman because you had to be from traumas? And so, do you
Mm.
know who you truly are without traumas? And so, that's something else that I had to ask myself after my traumas was who I really was, or was it my trauma that put it on me, or my family, or my friends, or my
That's
environment, or the fact that I come from a small town, or, those
yeah,
different things.
well, that's interesting because as you're saying that, I'm thinking, well, don't your challenges and obstacles kind of also help you define who you are, right? Like without those, would you
They
be the
do.
same Tanya, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that. And then but
Mm.
then it's also asking yourself, obviously with being a strong woman, it's wonderful to be a strong woman, right? But how is that showing up? Is that affecting your attitude? Are you a little bit more nasty because you're a strong
Yeah.
woman? A little bit more pessimistic because you're a strong woman? And is that really who you are?
Yeah. And
So yeah,
and the same goes both ways, right? Like if I'm thinking for because I think this is such a great conversation, it's almost a question, do you need to be those things? Or have you told like, like don't cry for even man, right? Like is it
yeah,
do you need to not cry? Or are you know what I mean? Like I like questioning the narrative a little bit. But and
yeah,
the reason, so where I'm going with this, though, Tanya, you'll appreciate this, I'm sure, is I want to see how that impacted your transition because I think um, if someone just listens to this show and it doesn't help them transition into a better version of themselves, then it's just a waste of time, right?
mm-hmm,
That's not what we're doing here. We're like, yes, this is great networking and this is great kind of mastermind on the air, but at the same time, if we can help that transition to help someone, that's makes it all that much better. And we get great reviews and we get feedback all the time. And I think that's, and I'm sure you're in the same space as a coach, as as a leader. It's so fulfilling to see that. Um, in retrospect, and we're gonna fast forward, obviously, because you've done some amazing things. But in retrospect, what do you think, looking back, you think didn't serve you well? I don't know if there's anything in particular that didn't serve you well by any means, and at the time maybe you felt that it did, or if there's anything looking back that I would have doubled down more on this, or maybe I wouldn't have subtracted, I would have added more, I would have invested more. Like, is there anything that comes to mind that could help someone who's listening or watching make a
yeah,
faster transition? I always like to ask that, to see. Hindsight is 2020, so
yeah. It sure is, isn't
yeah.
it? I think the one thing that did not serve me at all was my fear. It just didn't
Mm,
serve me, and the fact that I am a woman, the fact that I'm a Black woman, being in this space that is not accompanied by someone that looks like me, I had a whole bunch of fear that I wasn't going to be accepted, that I wasn't going to, you know, uh, I don't know. There was just so much fear surrounded around that. And so it's not there anymore.
yeah.
I've now realized that me being a woman is actually a good thing in this business.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's just my fear didn't serve me. So I would say that anyone who is afraid, they're like tiptoeing through because, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. Let those things happen. Let them happen because you're not going to learn any lesson if you're allowing fear to hold you back.
Yeah. That's a good answer. As you're saying that, Sometimes I wonder, Tanya, and I'm really glad we can have this conversation on the air, because sometimes we're, thinking out loud for others as well. It's sometimes I wonder if like these labels, right? Oh, I'm a director of this, CEO of that, black male, black woman. I wonder sometimes if those serve us or hinder us more, even like psychologically to ourselves. Like, I'm
Yeah,
wondering if looking back at the younger Ruben, if, and I don't think it's funny because I didn't grow up labeling myself like very often, even like when you talk about, and this is an interesting conversation when you talk about being a minority. If you notice that you're a minority, do you move differently than if you actually don't pay attention that the fact you're a minority?
right.
That to me are very interesting thoughts to think about as
It
we kind of
really
label
is.
ourselves. What are your thoughts?
Oh my goodness, you're absolutely right because that's exactly what I did. I moved differently because I was a woman, and I moved differently because I was a Black woman. And now that I look back, I'm like, why did you do that? You kind of held yourself back
Yeah, yeah,
because of the perception that you think others had of you, Tanya. Like, why? And
yeah.
so I agree that sometimes putting those labels on ourselves, no matter what the label is, it can be a hindrance. And I think the important part is to use the positives around that. I think that women are great communicators. We love to talk, we love to go into detail. I think that is fantastic to be a real estate investor. So let's turn those things around and think about the positive on
Yes.
how it can impact us,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and this is
yeah.
the great segue because it talks. This is exactly what you talk about tragedy. How do you turn a tragedy, or how do you turn something that you don't envision to go your way into a positive? You know what? That door closed, but now that it closed, I'm able to do X, Y, Z. And I'm sure you've experienced a few things. So let's get into the meat and potatoes real quick. So
Yes.
you've done a lot of different experiments in the real estate space, and again, I appreciate you kind of being vulnerable and opening up yourself to the psychological stuff, because I think we definitely need that to talk about that a little bit
Yeah.
more within our community. So I really appreciate that, but don't want to take away from what you've done aside from all those things. You do long-term rentals, short-term rentals. You've kind of done some house hacking. You're telling me you're in the middle of a middle of a flip right now. Is that what you're doing? A flip?
I am. Yes.
That's interesting. Okay, so which experiment came first for you?
Um,
You remember?
Short-term rentals came first. So short-term rentals, Airbnb came first for me.
Hmm.
It was just a way for me to make extra money while I was doing a lot of traveling for work. And I think at the time Airbnb just came out. I had personally used it for myself, and I was like, this is a great idea.
Is
In
this a
the area
property
that
you owned?
This was actually an apartment that I was renting out. I was
Hmm.
living in Silver Spring, Maryland at the time. And I was
Some
like, let me
rental arbitrage.
rental arbitrage. Yes, sir. And at the time, I was really lucky because they actually allowed me to do it. I know that's, always a touchy subject for people getting into rental arbitrage, but that was my first experience. And I did that for two years, 2.5 years. I did that. I mean, paid for my rent plus some, and vacations and all the above. And it definitely wasn't where it is now as far as how Airbnb has grown. But yeah, that's kind of how I started.
So, would you? Because I know how I got started into STR. It was actually someone who came on this show. Which shout out to Michael Shogun. I always say that. But for you, was it like you had stayed at one? You're like, oh, this is pretty neat. Because I'll tell you what my first thought was. I'm like, yeah, this is cool, but you're gonna have a lot of spotty bookings. Like that's not consistent, like long
Right.
term rent. Until you're in the space, you're like, no, 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 hold on, like. This is real rent and arbitrage by the day. Like you're getting like
Yeah.
3 times worth, 3 to 5x time worth what long-term rentals would be. So for you, what was that? Who planted that seed?
See, okay, again, I love to learn, right? So
Hmm.
I spent like
You're
three
digging.
months was digging, just figuring out, watching all the videos, listening to all the podcasts, whatever that were out there on it. And so I knew my market. I knew I was in a really good market. So I was like, I know this is going to do well. And I just put everything in place. I made it so that it was comfortable for the renters, that it made sense with my communication and my process and how I did everything. I knew I was going to kill, and I did every time. I had to turn people down. That's how many bookings it was.
Wow. That's crazy. So for someone who, has gotten a taste of short-term rental, long-term rental, and house hacking, if you were to pick one, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Yeah.
You can only pick one, Tonya. Which one do you pick and why?
As a newbie,
Okay, I like what you're doing there. There's levels to this, y'all.
as a
As a
newbie,
newbie.
I would, yes, house hack, most definitely.
Okay, why?
Well, I mean, because the fact that you can leverage these really low down payment loans, right? You also get the experience of being a landlord as well, right? Let's say you're house hacking like a duplex. You get that experience. You get to understand kind of what the day-to-day operation is and how you want to operate as a property manager, right? I mean, why not have somebody pay for your rent or pay for your
Yeah,
mortgage? Why
I think
not?
that's a big one, Tanya, because it's like when you're house hacking, you start. So one of the biggest expenses, flat out, is people's. It's their rent, right? Cost of living, right? So when
Yep.
you're able to eliminate that, I think you kind of get the investment bug a little bit. You're like, hold on, and so
Yep.
because I would say, as I call it, experiments, as you guys know, which are just proofs of concepts that have worked before that you apply, I think it's all about momentum. And that's why I love your answer, because you said as a beginner, and the best thing we can do, I'm sure you would agree, is get started and then let that momentum
Yeah.
pick up. So for you having done short-term rentals, long-term rentals, and transitioning, I'm sorry, so starting out with short-term rentals and transitioning into long-term rentals, um part of my question I was asking is, I lost my train of thought, y'all. I did it again. So, because we were talking about, before I got interrupted, we were talking about how you started with Airbnbs, right? And then you went into
Yep.
long-term rentals. So yeah, I was gonna ask you, what was the transition like? Did it happen simultaneously, or did you purchase another one and kept the Airbnb? Because I remember you're leasing it out, right? You're renting it. So then was that the transition for you? I just want to get a feel to give people an idea of how
Yeah.
that transition could look for them. Yeah.
Yeah, so it transitioned from the Airbnb to the house hacking because I
Yeah.
moved from Silver Spring,
Yeah.
right? And so I moved from Silver Spring and eventually I landed in Dallas. And
Okay.
I knew that as soon as I got to Dallas that I was going to house hack, because that's all I kept hearing on Bigger Pockets, which is one of my
Shout out to
favorites.
Bigger Pockets for sure.
Shout out to Bigger Pockets. House hacking, house hacking, house hacking, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do as soon as I get to Dallas. So that was kind of the transition for me. And then I was house hacking for a while. So it was kind of like a mother-in-law suite type situation.
Sure.
And I decided I was going to travel the world for a year. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to travel the world for a year. I need to get somebody in my spot. So I went through the process of finding another tenant. And so now I had two tenants. And while I was gone, I got a property management company to deal with the tenants while I was gone. So I actually held it on for another year and a half. And as soon as I got back from out of the country, I was like, oh, this market is fantastic. And I was like, let me test it. Because my original goal was actually hold it for a while. I wanted
Right.
to keep that at least for 10, 15 years. I wanted to hold that property. And but I was like, let me look and see. And when I looked to see, the market was doing really, really great.
Yeah, what period of time was this?
This was December 2020,
Mm.
which is crazy, right? December 2020, Like at the time, I couldn't believe it. Like it had already, how much did it appraise for at that time? Because I was like, let me get an appraisal, let me see. I can't remember exactly when it was. But my realtor told me at the time, she was like, just wait, just wait. And I was like, okay. I mean, with all this COVID stuff, she's like,
Yeah.
just wait. And so we looked at the market again back in August of September of last year, 2021. And the property had appreciated by $100,000 by that time.
Crazy.
And I was like, okay, I'm ready. So I just actually sold it back in October, and I used the profit from that to do the flip that I'm doing right now in Tampa.
Okay, so one might ask, because you're buy and hold, etc., right? One might ask, and I just asked this to one of my partners where we helped him sell his duplex. Why did you choose to sell? And what are some of the things that you weighed in? Why sell? Why not
Yeah,
refinance? Why what HELOC? Like what
yeah,
was your thought process as you're going through that?
yeah. That's a very good question, because I had to go through all of those questions for myself because one, I had to ask myself, what was my final goal? Not final, but what was my next goal? And actually, after learning about Airbnb, after learning about house hacking, my next learning journey was actually about multifamily and syndication. I
Mm,
joined a mentorship program in Dallas. And that's where most of my knowledge lies right now, is in multifamily and in syndications. And so I knew that I wanted to leverage that property to get into that strategy. So I know I definitely could have went a different route, right? I could have refinanced it. I could have, got a loan on the property, but I kind of wanted to just, all right, let's move on from this. Let's take out what I can take out from this and move on, and have the multifamily be my primary focus. And so that's exactly why I took it out of that. And I did this flip, because at the end of the day, it's going to end up, I'm going to be able to looking to purchase a $2 million property within the next couple of months with that strategy that I decided to use. So I had to look at like my end goal and how quickly I wanted to get there.
I
Yeah.
love that. Work with the end in mind. I love
Yeah.
how, by the way, I've never heard someone say that, and I love it. Learning journey. That's like super dope. Learning journey. That's really what it is. Like it's a
Is.
learning journey. And what I love about that learning journey, you have the end in mind, right? And this is part of the reason, like we'll start a show like this is, hey, I want to get into real estate. Okay, great. What kind of real estate do you want to get into? And part of the real estate experiment is to, you know, experiment either some to get some quick data back and say,
Yeah.
this is what I want to do or I don't want to do, or listen to our show like this, right? Listen to somebody like Tonya, right, who's done it and say, you know what, that sounds like more like me. Let me go as quickly as possible with the knowledge and education to apply it, right, without analysis paralysis. Because I know people
Yeah.
just listen to bigger pockets for years and don't take action. So
Mm-hmm.
right, but so interesting. So you had your end goal, your end goal in mind, and I love that because there is no right or wrong when you have a goal. It can
Yep.
be wrong if you're don't have a goal, because then you don't know, you don't even feel confident about what you're doing. But because you have
Right.
that goal, gives you the confidence, it gives you the permission to make that move, which I love. So where are we at in the learning journey? I'm going to paraphrase you. Are we still, is that the flip that we're currently working on right now?
So the learning journey is, I mean, yeah, I guess you can say that it's definitely been a learning journey, because this is the first time I've actually flipped a property out of state and long distance.
Wow.
So there's a lot that's been, a lot that's going great, a lot that I would change. So yeah, it's definitely still a learning journey. And then also trying to build a team in a different state has also been something new for me. I've never built a team in a different state. And so, yeah, I think that's where I'm at now.
So right now your learning journey phase is still flipping, and then as you're doing that, you're educating yourself in multifamily. So when you're ready to pull the trigger, you'll do it. Is that kind of where we're at right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't really say the learning journey is with the multifamily. Like, I know exactly what I want to do with that. It's just about finding the right deal and pulling the trigger.
Keyword.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
The
awesome.
right deal.
Yeah,
So if
that's
one
awesome.
falls on my lap right now today, I'm going for it.
Are you syndicating it if you fall come across this deal, or no? Would you be on your
No,
own for this one?
yeah, I'll be on my own for this one.
Okay, awesome. What criteria can the people be on the lookout for? You're on the show here, so maybe we got some bird dogs. I don't know. What are we looking for?
So I am still in love with the Tampa Bay area. That's where I'm from. I love the Tampa Bay area. I love looking for, I would say anything, if I had to throw some numbers out there, I would say 3 mil and under, right?
Mhm.
And I'm also looking for me, it doesn't matter the amount of units, but I am looking for a minimum cash on cash of 10%. That's the minimum. Um, and my goal is to burr it. So yeah. So if anyone knows anything out there, let me know.
I'll connect you with somebody out there.
Yeah.
Might serve you. You said
There's
Tampa,
so
right?
much growth, so much growth in
I
Tampa.
know. Yeah, I mean Florida, you cannot. Maybe I'll say that blindly, but I feel like anything in Florida is always, just like, oh, such good
Yeah.
numbers.
I think like there was on the top 20 list, there was a Florida city on like that entire list, because I feel like
Right.
maybe two, but like the biggest, the largest growing areas with the best place to invest. So you cannot go wrong with Florida, even though
No.
everybody talks mess about Florida. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I know. The Florida man, this, that. Um,
Uh-uh.
but and it's a no income tax, right?
Yeah, even better.
Saying it so lightly. Oh, because I bounce around between New York, Boston, and Georgia, and I'm like,
Yeah.
stay away from the Northeast. That's interesting. Okay, cool. So, just want to ask you, as well as for you're talking about vehicle to get into multifamily. I think that's really interesting because I think multifamily it's definitely not an amateur's game. Um, and there's definitely a lot that goes into getting the right deals. You can find a
Hmm.
deal, but is it going to be the right deal?
Yeah.
What's I think you're a good example of kind of like showing that transition of like, where your end goal is, this is where I'm going to start. What's something do you think is some, when you look at your journey that could, Ruben, yeah, I think if I were to do it again, instead of flipping, I would have done this, or I would have done the other rental arbitrage. Like, is there anything you look back on it? And it doesn't have to be in that, like, oh, I regret. There's no such thing. I believe it's just a
Yeah.
learning curve, but more like, during this time right now, as we're speaking, maybe this is the best vehicle, because I do believe that whether you're riding a Toyota versus a motorcycle versus a bicycle versus, an airplane, you always want to use the best vehicle. And
Right.
with respect to the skill set, the time, you talked about, you being able to travel. So again, depending on somebody's job situation, like what are your, I guess, just
Yeah.
overall thoughts on like best vehicles right now for someone who's maybe in that beginner phase and wants to kind of have a rocket fuel.
Yeah. I mean, I probably can't answer the question of what's the best vehicle. I definitely can tell you what I would have done differently.
Yeah.
I can answer that first question that you
Sure.
asked. And I think if I would have done it again, I probably would have done more duplex, triplex, quads, and held them and built a portfolio,
Mm,
and then sold the portfolio to get me into multifamily. I think that's
yeah.
the direction I probably would have gone into,
Mm-hmm.
um, going that route. And again, like I said, there's nothing wrong, I don't think, with how I did it.
Yeah.
But if I had to do it again, I probably would have held on to that property, um, and got more very similar to them and hold on to them and then
Yeah.
sell them at a wonderful deal. Yeah, I think that's what I would have done.
Experimentation I always experiment. And the reason why is I'm always trying to find the best tool, the best method, and the best vehicle to help me get to my end goal. One of the tools that we use in the short-term rental space is Guesty for Hosts. Now, Experimentation, you know that I love to test things, and I wouldn't be sharing with you anything that I don't use myself. As a short-term rental superhost, Airbnb superhost, listings that we own and co-host at the same time, I can tell you that there's no better software that allows us to streamline our business. Right now, currently, there's actually 3 properties right now that are currently where guests are checking in, and I'm here with you, and I did not need to send in check-in instructions for these current properties, right? There are multiple ways that you can streamline your operation from on the front end and on the back end, from being able to create a website, from being able to get income reports for your team, to looking at statistics, to setting up auto reviews, to integrating your smart lock so that you don't have to sit here and send every day and remind yourself to send the passcodes for your smart locks. No, instead you can integrate directly the exact same way that you can actually send your cleaners a link so that they don't have to remind themselves when they need to go to cleanings. There's text reminders that go out. There's links that can go out for them. This is a tool that if you're looking to give a smooth experience for your team on the back end, it will truly reflect, and it does, for your guests on the front end. Make sure you go to host.guesty.com and use our unique link. Our unique link will be in our bio, in the show notes. If you're currently watching this, you'll see it right here at the bottom of my screen. Use this unique link so that you can tell Guesty that I sent you. You don't want to miss out on this. You need a PMS, property management software, in your business if you're looking to operate like a super host that you deserve to be, so that your guests can have the best experience that they deserve to have at your properties. Again, that host.guesty.com. Use our unique link that is here on the screen, in the bio, and in the show notes if you're listening to this, guys. Happy hosting. Let's talk about the tactical, because I want to leave our listeners with some tactical approach. And again, maybe just catering this episode to, you know, a woman who's out there who's trying to, you know, kind of do what you've done. I didn't get a chance to ask, you know, when you were making these moves, were you also, you know, working? Were you, do you have, was it a job? Was it like
Yes.
business that you were doing? Like, let's talk about that, because I think it's important to be able to relate to the transition of sometimes you hear somebody, oh, like I quit my job, and it's like, okay, yeah, but I can't do that right
Yeah.
now. Being more like, oh no, this is what I was able to do out of state. This was what I was able to do while
Yeah.
I was at work. Like, here's what I leveraged, my W-2. Like, I'm curious as
Yeah.
to what that
Absolutely.
looked like. Yeah, for someone
Yeah.
out there.
So I definitely had W-2s during this entire process. I am a workaholic, so I actually had multiple W-2s while I was doing this. I'm an instructional designer by trade,
Nice.
which is a fancy word of saying that I'm a e-learning developer, training project manager. And I've been doing that for 10 years. And the thing is I've also been doing that for 10 years from home. So I've been remote and with my own schedule, being able to do kind of what I want. So that made things a lot easier for me, that I wanted to go into real estate, that I had control over my time. But then I also use those W-2s and leverage what I was making from those W-2s to then go and invest as well. So that's kind of how my journey went. I think that if you are someone out there who is thinking about quitting your job, I'm very conservative. And I say, don't quit until you got something to replace it, right? Even though there are some folks out there that can hit the ground running and they're like, no, I'm getting out of this. That's just going to motivate me even more. You know,
You
the
gotta
fact
know
that I don't
yourself.
have, yeah. So, you know, everyone's different, but for me, I was very conservative. I really wanted something to replace that income before, you know, I quit my job.
Got it. That's super
Yeah.
helpful. I think that's important to hear, because sometimes we hear about like the end and the beginning, but we don't hear like the in between. Like, how did that
Yeah. The in
transition happen?
between. Yeah.
And we kind of get
Yeah.
just compressed a little bit.
Because
Um,
it's all in there, right? But that's exactly what I did. I just saved up a lot of money as well. And thankfully this industry, it is a high paying salary industry as an instructional designer. And so having multiple of those really, really helped me just be able to put those down payments, rehab, and all those different things. So that's just how my process went.
did you use any of those rehab loans or anything like that for the house hacking, or were you just what kind of what structure did you
No,
use?
yeah, actually, it was a turnkey. So I didn't really need to do any work to it. I just needed to have reserves to when it something did go wrong because it was an older home. And so I definitely made sure that I had reserves because over the years that I had it, I had to replace so many things, the hot water heater. I had to do a complete electrical system for front and the back house. There was a flood after the winter storm. Like there was just so much going on. And so I was so thankful that I calculated it and I'm super conservative with my numbers and I had the money to be able to do what I needed to do. But no, I did not use a rehab loan.
That's interesting. I feel like the war stories, that's when you really, the flooding, there's always, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, which
And
is it's good for you to know that going into it. So it's you talk about having different like strategies, like, and what I'm really geeking out about that I want to talk about with you is like the whole life insurance, and you talk about
yes.
401k, all that stuff. So I want to talk about one thing, the whole life insurance, because that's something that came to my attention like about what, a year and a half ago, that I started
Mhm.
using. I haven't invested with it yet. I'm stacking up with it. Which it's as we know, you can
Good
borrow
for
from it.
you.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm really excited about it because and it's like that's something that I don't come across a lot. Like I feel like, I've had I had two or three people talk about like, the whole infinite banking model, but it's not been talked about.
Yeah. Like a
Um
secret society.
I know. And I'm like, wait, what? Are you kidding? Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because hearing it from you, I think will
Yes.
be very powerful. And I just want to echo that and highlight it every time I come across it.
Yeah. So like that's also part of my learning journey with this infinite banking, whole life insurance thing. Like I love it. I'm part of this group that all we do every single week is sit and talk about how we can use our life insurance policy to invest in whatever you want. But a lot of us have a lot of interest in investing in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, basically, if you're not familiar with whole life insurance, it's basically an insurance policy that comes with a death benefit, like traditional policies do, but it also comes with cash value that you can pull out to invest. You can even pull it out just to pay for your regular mortgage, everyday expenses, right? And so it also collects dividends, right? And it is really depending on how it's structured. That is like the prime thing about it, how it's structured and how you want to use it. So I currently have two policies right now. I have one policy that's structured that it slowly grows over time. And then I have another policy where I have all of the money up front. So
What does that
and
mean?
I'm used so basically, for example, let's just hypothetically say you had a $10,000 annual premium for your policy. If you
Mhm.
have it structured where it's growing over time, you might only day one, you might only be able to pull out 7,000, six
Sure.
thousand, $5,000 out of that policy because how it's set up. But if you have it set up in a different way where you can get, if I put in 10,000, you might be able to get 9,000 out day one because how it's set up. Now, it doesn't grow as much over time, but the purpose of that is that, for example, I use
Accessible.
that. Yeah. So I use that policy because just now, because I'm doing a rehab that I want to go ahead and pay my contractors with that money, right? And so I wanted all that money up front. So there's different ways that you can use the life insurance policy, but it's like the best thing. And the fact that you're basically your own bank
Yeah.
and you're loaning yourself money, and then you can even loan other people money and become a passive investor that way with the life insurance policy too, right? Which I'm actually looking to go that route eventually too. That I
Ooh, I
don't,
gotta talk to you then. That's awesome.
yeah, become my own banker and start lending out. Yeah.
That's
So
super.
yeah,
That's super. Yeah, that the point I want to highlight is, and you'll keep me honest, Tanya, because I always like to let the experts speak. And so when we set mine up, it was basically when you borrow against it, the rate at which you borrow at is less than the rate at which you're gaining at. If I'm
yes,
saying that correctly, which is why they coined the term infinite banking, because you're technically borrowing on something that you're gaining, because you're not you're borrowing from the pool, not from the actual initial investment. Um,
exactly.
so it's just super
Yeah.
powerful.
So for like in this instance, yeah. So like in this instance, when I borrowed from mine, so to borrow, I think it's at a 4% right now. So I made sure that I had a promissory note to myself that I have to pay. I think I charged myself 10% interest.
Mm,
And so I charge myself 10% interest to use my money, and then I pay that back. So that difference is allowing the policy to grow on top of the dividends that it also
mm.
grows with too. So yeah. And then if you're doing it, not just borrowing it to yourself, but lending it out to a deal or someone else, then of course you can negotiate your own interest rates, whatever you want them to be.
Yeah, we're a
That's the
hard
thing
money
I
lender.
love
Give
about
me
it
my
too.
two
Yes.
points up front and 12%. What's up? I love
Yes.
it. So more power to you. This is important. I just want to, share that because I saw that that's something that, that your team had shared with mine. And I was like, okay, that's really neat that you're
Yeah.
tapped into that. And I definitely am going to give you the opportunity to basically call out your real estate investing academy, which is definitely something I would want to tap in. So, because if anybody knows whole life insurance and how to reinvest funds with that, I want to tap into that network, and that would be yours. So that's really awesome that you're doing that. Now, for some more contextual, I guess, practical options as well. 401k. It's funny because I was just having this conversation with someone who came on who had actually used their 401k. And typically, like as an entrepreneur, I'm like, if you have a job and you're like, okay, like what's a 401k going to do for me? Well, it depends on
Yeah.
how you utilize it. How have you used it, or how do you teach your students to use it for someone who's out there who's like, okay, I'm looking to make this transition.
Yeah.
I do have this 401k. How do I leverage it?
Yeah. So I've used my 401k in a couple of different ways. The first time I used it was because you're able to use your 401k if you're a first time home buyer, right? And so that if you're going to get, for example, an FHA loan with that 3.5% down,
Mhm.
you can actually take that money from your 401k and use that for the down payment. So that's for my house hacking situation. That's actually what I did. I used that money from my 401k for the down payment.
Is
So
that
that's,
I'm so
go
sorry,
ahead.
Tanya. When you say that, is that if I understand correctly, most 401ks are is it pre-tax money?
Yeah. And because
Pre-tax, does
you
it? Yeah.
and because and there's different qualifiers. Another one is like if you're just having a baby, right? Those are ways that you can pull out of the 401k without any penalties, right? For taking
Oh,
that
okay,
money out.
that's what it is. Penalties. Do you still
Yeah.
get taxed on it? Again, I know we're no accountants here, or I'm just thinking out loud. Do they still tax on that?
So if I'm correct, and yeah, I'm not an accountant either, but my understanding is it's postponed. That's my understanding.
Deferred, right?
Deferred.
Gotcha.
Um, but please don't quote me on that. I could be totally
Yeah.
wrong.
No, we'll
Um,
look it up.
yeah,
We're
but
learners. Yeah.
yeah, we're on a learning journey. But yeah, that's the first way that I use my 401k. The second way that I use my 401k is I actually, from previous jobs, had multiple 401ks sitting with a custodian. And so
Hmm.
I had one sitting with Vanguard, I had another one sitting with Fidelity, and they were just sitting there. And I wasn't contributing to them because for some reason, I forgot about them, which is awful.
Do
But
you not take those when you change jobs though?
I didn't have to.
Oh,
So the
interesting.
way
So
that,
they just stay with them and they
yeah,
accumulate.
and they just charge me a month, and I think it was monthly, it was annual fee, right?
Hmm.
Now it was invested, right? So it was invested in a fund, but I wasn't contributing anything to it. So they were kind
Hmm.
of just, I was sitting there and not doing anything.
Does
Um,
that mean, I'm so sorry to be so technical? Do you think at that point it's breaking even, or it's losing money, or it is actually still gaining money?
for
Yeah,
me at the time, I think I was losing.
it's not working
Yeah,
real estate. Let's put it that way. It's not being
right.
put to work. So tell
Right. It
us
was
how you
not
put it
being
to
put to
work.
work. So the way that I put it to work is I actually transferred it over to a self-directed IRA. So self-directed traditional, self-directed Roth, as well as a self-directed HSA. And so all of my 401ks that I was able to transfer, I did. I still have one 401k that I still have with my current employer. They will not let me transfer it as long as I'm employed with them, which sucks. Like, you're supposed to
Wait,
tell me what
so
to do with my
do
money.
you can't tell what to do. So when you do that, let's say you have like three different 401ks, can you consolidate them into one? Is that what you did or no?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
you
you do
can.
this. Okay, self-directed. So what's do you, again, I'm so sorry, like this might not be your expertise, but we're having such a good discussion here. What's the difference between that and a solo 401k? Do you know? I've heard
I've
of it.
never had a
Yeah.
solo 401k.
Okay. Because I don't know.
Um,
I got this is a note from me. I'm taking notes here. We're gonna do our research. It's like self-directed IRA versus solo 401k. I feel like it's we'll look it up. We'll look it up.
yeah,
Experimentation. We'll leave that for you
yeah,
guys to look into. But nonetheless, you're able to like get this money, and then what did you do with it?
yeah. So then I use it to invest in real estate. And so with the self-directed IRA, there's like an unlimited amount of things that you can invest your self-directed IRA in. I think the only thing you can't invest in is like collectibles. Um, I want to say jewelry might be, but there's like maybe two or three things on the list in the entire world of the possible things that you can invest in. There's only like two or three on the list of what you can't use self-directed IRAs to
Mhm.
invest in. And real estate is a big one, what people use, because it's a quicker way to build your retirement. Now, the thing that people need to know about self-directed is that money belongs to your IRA. It has the same stipulations as any other retirement plan, is that you can't touch that money into retirement. So I think that's the big piece about that. Even if you're using that money, your IRA invests in a multifamily, or your IRA invests in an
Yeah,
Airbnb or flip or whatever it is, the rent or the profit that's collected, it belongs to your IRA. And so
that's
you
crazy.
cannot use that money to go and travel the world and have a good time. That money belongs to your IRA and can't touch it until you retire.
So does that mean that like you would have to have like an account that's set up for your IRA for all the, I don't know, the rent, the lease? Like
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think here.
So what it's called is a custodian. So just like Fidelity or
Mhm.
Vanguard, they're a custodian, they hold your money, right? And so you would have that IRA with that custodian, and the custodian would do those transactions on your behalf. So you let them know, hey, I have this investment. Here is the money here is the information for it to be wired into escrow, and they will do that transaction for you. So
What
the
a,
custodian is
and
the one.
wow.
Yeah.
And so for the cash flow that you make, like the proceeds, like let's say you have a lease and someone's paying you rent, would you have to send them to the custodian account of where to pay
Exactly.
rent?
It would
Wow.
it would send to the IRA. And usually how it's written is like, you know, Fidelity, I forgot how it is. It belongs to Tonya Weathers on behalf of this IRA, something like that. Like it's this
Yeah, yeah,
long
yeah.
thing that you would write on the check line, right? And that note, and that makes them understand that it goes directly to your IRA. So if the tenants are paying rent, they're paying rent to the IRA.
Interesting. So would you advise if someone's, coming up, and again, I want to make this a special for our ladies, minorities, if they're listening to this and they're like, oh, okay, I just got a new job and I was actually just thinking that should I take my money and, put it into a better vehicle myself and not opt in, or actually use this as a vehicle and, opt into a 401k? What would you, at least even if you don't know her backstory, but what would you
Yeah.
tell little Tanya? Because we're talking about opportunity cost here, which is a
Yeah.
very important conversation, and we're transitioning into breaking the curse here. So,
Yeah.
what do you tell little Tanya? What's best practice here?
Ooh,
Curious.
okay. I would tell little Tanya
Yeah,
to never invest in a 401k.
that's interesting. Why? Why?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Because my money can grow faster and better elsewhere. Because
Mm,
the original purpose of why a 401k was set up is not what it can be used for today. And so
this is true.
I,
I love that answer. By the way, love that
you
answer.
know, and so like my money can grow so much quicker and I have control of it versus putting it in a stock market that who knows what's going to go on with it. And so I would tell young Tanya to never put her money into a 401k.
And well, so now that Tanya knows this, what would you tell Tanya to do with that? And I know you've kind of shared your journey, but when you say better vehicles than the 401k, what are some bullet points maybe that you come top of mind first?
Yeah, I mean, basically everything we've talked about so far, try and save up and get a life insurance policy. Put that money into a self-directed IRA, save it and find a way to house hack, all those different ways so you can make your money work for you a little quicker in a better vehicle than to let your employer only give you X percent, which you probably can't afford to match, maybe not. That's pulling out of your monthly, weekly paycheck.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
believe
what
you
I
can take your 401k and put it into transfer it into a self-directed IRA, right?
My employer told me no.
Oh, interesting.
I specifically called and asked. They were like,
Right.
no, as long as you are employed with us, you cannot pull that money out into a self-directed IRA. That's at least what they told me. And I
Oh,
don't know if
interesting.
that's
Yeah.
per account or per custodian or per employer. I don't even know. But that's what my employer told me.
That's interesting. So you're
Yeah.
you're you're literally saying from your experience that you see that 401k and self-directed IRA is greater than a 401k,
Yeah.
hands down. It's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Hands down.
So let's talk about the, like transitioning into, breaking the generational curse. If you were to define that to again the younger version of Tanya, what would you tell that person, um that young lady, that she should, again, and this is for all of us really, like what would you focus on to start breaking the curse? Like is it reading more, is it being aware more, is it experimenting more,
Yeah.
is it finding someone like you? Like what would that first step look like to break the generational curse? Because we were talking about addition earlier, and I want to bring
Yeah.
this full circle. If you believe this to be true, I'm just curious, what would you tell?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many steps. I mean, we all know the first thing starts with mindset, right?
Mm,
And we talked a little bit about it before too, is like if you have a certain mindset, I think it's very important to dig within yourself and ask why do you have that mindset and what mindset do you want to have? And what outside influences do you have? I mean, one of the big things, especially with minority communities, I think a lot of times, like we talked about before, we kind of box ourselves in these small little boxes because that's what society has done to us.
yeah.
And it's kind of hard to break out of that, especially when other people around you are still stuck in those boxes as well. And so
Mm,
if you tell yourself and you change your mindset to say, I'm going to get out of this box. I don't want to have to worry about if I got into a car accident, could I pay for it? I don't want to have to worry about, if I have to choose between paying my rent or feeding my children. I don't want to have to worry about those things. And are you surrounded with people who also believe that as well. And they're willing to read books. They're willing to go to conferences and conventions and go to a different kind of bar that has CEOs there versus, those that don't, right? Are you willing to step outside the box and be different to really break the curses that have been haunting our communities? Because when it comes to healthcare, education, housing, we have had so many curses upon us because we have been afraid to step outside of the box. So it's the, and I'm not gonna say that's the only thing, right? Obviously, the society we live in and the system that have been built contributes to a lot of that. Um, but I think we've allowed that system to make us believe it. And I
Mm,
don't want us to believe that anymore. We are better than what quote unquote they think we are. So it starts with you and your mindset. Um, so yeah, that's what I would tell my young self. That's what I would tell somebody who's looking to you know, get away from all of those curses is to think about your mindset, get into different circles, um, step outside of your comfort zone, read a little bit more than you've ever read before, or Audible, listen,
yeah.
podcasts, whatever you got to do, right? Um, and ask yourself, where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? And don't be afraid to dream big.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really want to do, and I keep dreaming it, I want to go to outer space. I always
Mm,
have. I'm a big Star Trek fan. And now that people are, getting tickets left and right now, I'm like, I want to go. And I'm not afraid to say that and dream big and heck, maybe even do some investing on the moon. I am not gonna,
I
have
love
a
it.
glass ceiling. No, no, no. So
I,
don't
j-
be afraid to dream big.
yeah, and I just want you to know that we're gonna call this episode "Investing on the Moon," okay? Just for you, so that will capture someone's attention.
Perfect.
No, I love the that you went back to the mindset. I love that you kind of went back to the story that is being told and the story that you can start telling yourself to change the story. And then also you acknowledge the systemic issues, but then you also acknowledge the ownership that we can start from within, which I think
Yeah.
is the most empowering thing that we can do, because then it's contagious. um I want to add to that too, because I do believe, like, even conversations like these, and um it's funny because I think it's thrown around a lot, mentors and stuff like that. And I recently learned that your mentor and a mentor and a coach are actually two different things. I didn't even realize that. Did you know
Mm,
that? I didn't know
can
that.
see that.
Apparently, uh, a coach, right? You think of like Phil Jackson. I don't know if you know Phil
Right.
Jackson, coach of Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant.
Right.
He's a coach. He didn't win 6 championships. He doesn't have the athleticism. He's a great coach, right?
Mm,
A mentor is someone who's been in the
they've
steps that
done
you're
it.
trying to want.
Yeah.
And you need both, right? Like, and which is interesting because I think I've always what I'm spending a lot of, and this is another thing, is there's nothing wrong with spending money, right? It's cool to get the free stuff, but then sometimes if you want proximity, like, there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with paying for Tanya's time.
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
some we really need to make that a thing, because sometimes it's always that a scam, or we're spending some things on liabilities, but we're not really spending money on getting proximity or paying to even be in the room. I'm a huge believer of that. Going VIP wherever I can go, because those are people who
Yeah.
are willing to pay, and all of a sudden you've kind of filtered the room. Nothing wrong with
Yep.
that.
And now you're at the table.
At the table, pay for access. But educate yourself so that when you do pay for access, you actually are getting a lot of value. All right. But anyways, that was interesting, right? Because I think for me is what we can do, and sometimes what where isn't portrayed in the I don't want to loosely throw the word media around, because I don't think that's always fair to say that. But I think we're, as our people, we've we've even had like a black president. We've had so many people who have stepped in those shoes of where we want to be, that it may not be broadcasted, but if you can find someone who looks like you, who is like you, who's been in that position, reach out to them, because the cool thing is they will see a little bit of themselves in you, and usually are willing to open up that door. And I think that also gives you the
So
permission, even
true.
subconsciously and psychologically, that, oh, okay, this person is exactly where, would I trade places with that person? If the answer is yes, try to get in proximity to them. And so I would really encourage, everyone who's listening to do that, because I think that's one thing too that um, we we sometimes kind of fail to highlight, and sometimes it's also on us in our community to also open up that door as well. And I think we're
Yeah.
really headed in the right direction, like having conversations like these, and like seeing a lot of people who look like us and helping them, giving them that faith, giving them that permission. I just want to put that out there because I think that is there's a key little pillar in there that I just want to slip in. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I actually absolutely agree with that because I'm in the search for my own mentor slash coach that looks like me, that's at the next level that I want to be at. So I'm a big advocate for that because there it is something about walking in someone's path that, like, oh wait, they were just like me, they look like me, they have the same kind of
Mhm.
story that I do, come from the same kind of place that I do. And it's you tend to retain information more
Yeah.
when you can relate.
Mhm.
That's adult learning 101,
Yeah.
right? So when you can relate and you can see the experience in it, that's how you retain the information. But if you have a mentor that, yeah, they're great, or a coach, yeah, they're great, they have the track record, but maybe you don't have a lot in common with them, it can be hard to retain that information because you feel like you're lost in the sauce a little bit,
Yeah, you don't
so
identify. Yeah, you don't identify with them as being you have to, I recently joined a mastermind that talks about like, you know, my connection. What's going on here? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I think my connection went out a bit. Well, we'll reconnect. I'm not in my studio today, so I'm playing a little bit with spotty connection. Um, but yeah, I was saying, being in a mastermind talks about the overcoming that limiting belief that you have yourself of, like one was charging higher prices in this mastermind, and it's just you're projecting this fear that you have, well, like because you don't believe and you've never done it. And so it's like when you're with someone who's done it, they almost
Yeah.
give you that permission, and then you believe that you can do it and you do it. And a lot of it, like I love that when you go back to the self, because sometimes it's self-inflicted. It's like, oh, I don't believe that I can close this deal until you don't, believe, because maybe there's some things like you just haven't seen someone do
Yeah.
it, or maybe there's some doubt there. That's going to reflect in how you carry yourself, and how when you're at the closing table, when you're actually in a position to nail a deal, you might get passed on because it's, they could see that through you that you didn't feel ready, which I'm like, oh my God, when I hear
Mhm.
that stuff, I'm like, that is crazy. But it's true. And so
But
and it
it's
comes full
true.
circle.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's crazy. So I mean, listen, Tanya, you've literally over delivered. You stayed into the lab. We talked about, all the pillars that I honestly feel that there's so much more that you have to give, and I really want to give this opportunity to get people to, check you out. I didn't even get a chance to go so deep into what you're offering the community, but I definitely want to give you the opportunity to do that now. We were just
Yeah.
talking about offline how you have a wonderful website that's TonyaWeathers.com. And I want to make sure that people definitely check you out there. And Tonya Weathers also on Instagram. So I'll make sure I'll give you a follow there. We'll give you a shout out right after this as well. Make sure all of our followers go and follow what you're doing. It's amazing. But is there anything in particular, like how can people be in touch with you, and how
Yeah.
can they, even be in proximity to you maybe and work with you as well as a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go on my website, TonyaWeathers.com, you'll see all of the details about the investing academy that I have specifically for women. Unfortunately, I'm no longer doing a group coach as of right now, group coaching program as of right now, but I am doing one-on-one coaching. So if you are looking for kind of like a one-on-one white gloves type of situation, I'm definitely here to have a chat and see if we can work together, if we're a good fit. Um, but yeah, you can find out all those good details on the website. Like I said, I'm also on Tonya Weathers on Instagram. I'm always there DMing folks. They always have questions. Is this a good deal? Is this something that I should in this area? So even if you just, want a quick little advice, I'm always glad to chat. Always happy. I can talk about real estate all day, every day. I'll go to a bar and talk about real estate the entire time. And so feel free to hit me up. Feel
You got
free.
the real estate bug like the rest of us, so that's why I think we felt all the synergy here in the lab today. Just like that, definitely, you guys
Yes.
definitely check her out. If you're driving, I always say keep your hands on the wheel. We'll have everything in the show notes, so you can go ahead and follow Tonya and the wonderful things that she's doing. Definitely tap into her community, because I know she overpoured here into the lab, and we're very gracious and appreciative of that. So Tonya, thank you so much for stepping in the lab with us. Um,
You.
and just like that, we are out.